Okay, we live.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. So I am super excited. I almost did an entire talk now just in the preparation before we started this. So what we're going to be discussing tonight is kind of this interesting space where you apply for a design job, and so we just spoke about it right now, and so it's very interesting because a lot of us, so myself, Justin, Liesel, and even Jacqueline, who's also very involved, kind of ended up in this space of UI and UX design and so forth almost by accident. None of us kind of actually studied this, so we don't necessarily in retrospect have an understanding of kind of what it looks like applying for your first job as someone who's trained in this. Um, so this is something I've been wanting to do for a very long time. So what I did is I asked some of my previous students, and I'll just introduce them now in a second, to maybe share kind of what that journey is like, and kind of what they learned during that journey, in order to help anyone who's currently looking at maybe getting into the world of design, in terms of a career change, or maybe even just studying design and kind of curious what that looks like when you kind of graduate and you start looking at getting a job and so forth. But before that, what I just quickly want to do is I just want to kind of introduce kind of Zap and all those things. So for those of you that don't know just yet, Zap is primarily a Slack workspace. Kind of stands for South African Product Design. If you aren't on that kind of workspace, you can just go to zapd.co.za and kind of request an invite. Most of you that are here, I assume, actually kind of are already involved there. If you're not, check it out. Yeah, and kind of we are aiming to do these type of discussions and kind of knowledge sharing on a pretty regular basis. So I also just want to give a shout out to our sponsors. So first and foremost, IO Digital, who's a company that Liesel actually works for. You can just Google IO Digital. So I, like in the letter I, O, Digital. That is also the URL, right, Liesel?
It's io.co.za.
Oh, excuse
Very
me.
easy. Very easy.
Okay, there you go. io.co.za. And then also the other sponsor is NML. So you used to be New Media Labs. Now it's just NML, which is the company that Justin works for. So it's kind of a KFC situation, where kind of New Media Labs kind of was a bit outdated. So now they're just going by the acronym.
IBM.
Is that a IBM? Is that an accurate summarization, Justin?
Absolutely. New Media Labs
Okay.
was very cool like 13 years ago.
It's like space age,
Exactly.
or the information superhighway. Like,
when we were
yeah,
still designing things in Flash.
yeah, exactly. Cool. So yeah, those are the two big sponsors. So thanks so much to them. And also we have some other events and stuff planned. So if you are interested in joining future events and so forth, and even in-person events, check out, we're on meetup.com as well. So just go on meetup.com and search for ZAPD. You should find us there. All right. So I just quickly want to introduce the kind of the panel tonight. We are going to keep this very informal. There's nothing planned, no specific agenda. I think we can just take it as it comes. If you have any specific questions, please leave them in the text chat, and we'll just respond to them. If there aren't much questions, like I myself have a ton, I'm pretty sure Justin and Liesel also has a ton, so we can probably go on for pretty long as well. Cool. But so then in terms of introducing, dare I say, our panelists tonight. So first and foremost, let me start with Jane. So I think we approached Jane because she has a very interesting journey in the world of design / development and so forth. She originally studied branding, and then she did a course in web design and development. And she's actually been moving more and more into the world of development. So I think there's an interesting discussion there in terms of kind of possible journeys you can go once you kind of are in kind of that design environment. And then also Dean and Talor, who were actually Creative Academy students of mine last year. They just graduated end of last year. Both of them are currently working as well. So Dean's currently working at SnapScan. Talor is currently working at a company called Defijn. So I think they are still very freshly hired. So they would be able to shed a lot of light in terms of what that journey has been like. But I'll probably let you guys introduce yourselves as well, because that was a very high level overview. I just want to quickly check from Justin and Liesel. I don't know if there's anything you guys want to add or maybe mention before we get into this. Okay, doesn't seem that way.
All good from my side.
Okay, cool. So,
Yes.
yes. So, Jane, let's maybe start with you. Do you maybe just want to give a bit of an overview in terms of kind of who you are, what you're doing at the moment, and kind of your background?
Yeah, sure thing. So hi everyone. Yeah, good to be here today. So this is very much my personal journey, and I know that it looks different for every single person. I studied BCom undergrad in marketing, and I did a postgrad in brand strategy. I worked for a year, and this was around the time COVID hit, so it was a bit kind of tough to seek work. I've done a lot of interviews in my life, like a lot. And I found the tech space to be actually like more responsive, like to and easier to kind of get into a position than previously when I was looking for a job in strategy pandemic times. So currently I have 1 year's experience, mainly as a front-end developer. I worked for a company here in Cape Town. And to get that job, I had a bit of a strategy myself. I wanted to utilize my background and not just forget about it. So I wanted to position myself as someone with experience in branding, but who can also design and also do development. So more of a generalist, so that I could help out anywhere I could. And I found that this was particularly, I guess, useful for smaller companies where you'd have a broader role. So yeah, I have 1 year's experience as a front-end developer with a couple of things on the side. And I recently, about 4 days ago, got a job offer that I'm very, very happy about. And I'll be starting in 2 weeks. It's also for a front-end development role, but this is going to be, and interestingly enough, the same with this job. They liked the fact that I actually had the design experience and I could use Figma and I can make my own designs, because I think that communication between the departments is good. And yeah, so that was a great differentiating factor. And I think that's something that you should look into, like when you're positioning yourself, looking into what makes you stand out from another candidate, and not failing to mention that.
Oh, thanks so much, Jane. It's also interesting. I would also love, like, once we dive into this, because obviously Justin and Liesel are kind of very much in the world of actually hiring as well. I'm mostly a contractor, so I generally just kind of do consulting work and so forth. I don't necessarily do any hiring for a team or whatever. And I'd be curious from Justin and Liesel as well, what the kind of what would be the word, like whether that is something that's seen as beneficial, like whether someone has kind of a foot in design and something else like development or so forth, or whether you prefer someone who's just like super specialized and they're like the most amazing designer ever, but they can't really do much else. Yeah. But I see you both unmuted yourself. Wait a second. I just want to kind of have Taylor and Dean introduce themselves as well. Okay. Taylor, if you maybe want to go kind of give a bit of an overview of who you are, what your background is, and what you are currently doing.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor. And as Skulk mentioned, I recently finished studying at the Creative Academy with Dean. We both majored in interaction design, which I'm not actually sure if it's a term that everyone is familiar with, but it's basically just UX and UI design. And I minored in, or I did an elective in front-end development. I did my internship in June of last year, and I was really lucky in the sense that I was reached out to by someone on LinkedIn, and everything kind of fell into place really well, and the position was something that I was looking for. It was a small design agency, fully remote, which worked really well for me. So I was very lucky in that sense that I got offered that. And then after that, they offered me a position, but I was still studying. So I asked if I could potentially do part-time work for them. And it was kind of scary actually, because they weren't hinting at wanting someone part-time. But I really wanted to carry on, and I really wanted to just kind of throw myself into like the working world a bit more. So I asked them and said, like, how do you feel about me working part-time? And I kind of put myself out there and asked if I could help with more of the branding and the social media as well. So that was very cool. And then in December, I started working full-time for them. So it's been a good experience. It's been nice to slowly ease into it, from going from an intern to part-time or contractor, and then as a full-time employee. That's me.
Cool. Dean, you maybe want to give a bit of an introduction?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Dean. I, just like Taylor, also went to Creative Academy. Did a major in interaction design, also with a minor in front-end development. And how I started I think it was around a year ago. I also was very fortunate to be reached out to and got an internship. But that was very quick, only for a few weeks, just to start that experience and get that, the feeling of working in a studio and working with other designers together. And then after that, I actually did some of my first proper contract work on like communities like ZAPD and ZA Tech. And that was just me basically posting my information and posting my portfolio on the communities, and people reached out, and that's how I started doing my first little few jobs. And then around August last year, I just started applying for a bunch of positions, and I was also very lucky to get a position at SnapScan. And very similarly to Taylor, I also, while I was doing my studies, were busy doing it part-time. And there was a bit of a juggle between the two. It was also a nice transition going from the part-time, and then from this year, I've been working full-time for SnapScan as a product designer.
Awesome. You also have a bit of an interesting journey insofar that I think there was a different position that was advertised. Like, there wasn't necessarily a junior position advertised, and you effectively just reached out and then you said, like, hey, is there maybe something for me? Put it very bluntly, and they kind of almost, I want to say, they created a position. And I'd be curious, Justin and Liesel, like how often that happens, where there isn't necessarily a position, but someone you bump into someone, or someone shows a lot of potential, and you're like, hey, let's figure something out. Maybe we can bring this guy on board. We're not currently looking for a junior, but like we definitely can use the extra capacity. Yeah, and I think that's maybe a good like starting point to kind of introduce you guys as well. So Liesel, maybe you can just also give a bit of an overview of like who you are, where you fit in the world of design, and yeah.
Yeah, so I'm Liesel. I am actually the COO of IO. We're a product development, or predominantly product development company. We work with early stage startups. So it's a very progressive, very fast moving environment. There's no time to sit in your laurels. Yeah, I've clocked so many things in my head, and I was between like, am I going to make notes to comment on everything that you've said? I don't really fit into the design space, but I do fit into the hiring side of things and the people development side of things. So I've got a lot of experience there. And if I can just comment on, one of the things you just said is having that bravery. That's why people have that sentence on their website. You didn't find what you were looking for, email us in any case. It is, if they say that, they are leaving a door open for people to be brave within. So if somebody does take up that opportunity and drop a mail to your careers email, and it doesn't go through the hiring platform, like Bamboo or whatever solution people use, if you write something well there and it lands on my desk, I'm going to have a look. And so, yeah, definitely, like I would say email companies. I did a little poll on ZA Tech a while back, and I asked people what is their preferred way to get a new position. And I think I'm not sure, it was like one of the top or the second one. The one is being asked to come work for a company, so being headhunted. And the second one was the second favorite way of getting a new position was for people to actually go and look at the companies and study the company and look at their values or their principles posted on the website, and looking at their case studies and looking at their design work and going like, this is something that I want to be a part of. And once you understand that with the company, you know what intro to lead with when you email them. And if you've got that familiarity, and I feel like somebody has put in 15 minutes of their life to look at what we're doing, and to find the points that matches with where they want to go, that it makes a real big impact. And that is when somebody would say, listen, look at this candidate I found, or this candidate came to us. And that's when they make something available that wasn't actually posted. So that's a very valuable point. And people do make those, people do create opportunity for that if somebody walks in the door and you don't have to go and find them, versus doing all that work to go and find the right candidates, because that takes weeks and weeks and weeks of work.
And I think
I'll
that's
leave it at that for now, but I've got lots more to say.
Yeah. So I think it's also worth noting that like hiring is hard. And sometimes I kind of dread just putting a job description out there, because I know I'm going to have to weed through like 70% of people who are not nearly qualified for this position or have no idea what they even applied for. They're just sending CVs to everything they see. So I think even just like having that, and I'm trying deliberately not frame it as some type of hustle, like, oh yeah, you hear all these stories, but like genuinely, like, find companies that you're like, these guys are doing really cool work and I really like what they are doing, and just send them a message and say like, hey, listen, like I'm a designer or I'm a student or whatever. I just want to say I really dig what you guys are doing. Like, there's a lot of overlap in terms of the stuff you're working on and where my interests lie. And like, I just want to leave my details if you're ever looking for someone, or you're just looking for an intern or someone to help out. Maybe there's some extra work over the holiday season or whatever. And I think the prospect there for me, like I don't sit that much on the side of the hiring table anymore nowadays. But when I did, like just the prospect of, oh, thank goodness. Okay, cool. I don't need to go through the entire process of sifting through CVs, figuring out what I want in a job description, posting it everywhere, getting spammed in my email, and maybe just like, hey, let me maybe just give this guy, like, let's have a chat. Like, let's maybe just meet up, have a chat, and maybe I can just skip all that pain. I think it's also something that is something that's not spoken enough about. It's like it's a pain to also just hire people and find capacity and go through all that work. Yeah, Justin, I don't know if you maybe want to add to that.
Yeah, so I mean, my position is head of design and front-end development. So I, hire designers and developers. It's an incredibly difficult process, as you've mentioned, Scott. But I just want to go back to that point about, taking a chance, so to speak. You'd be surprised how many times organizations actually will try and find a position for someone who shows talent and promise and drive, and as Liesel said, has done a little bit of homework and found out who you are. It happens a lot more than you might think it does. I mean, a lot of the jobs that are out there aren't necessarily the ones that are posted on job boards and LinkedIn and whatnot and all of that. So I think if you find a company that resonates with you, you've got nothing to lose, right? All they can say is no. It's not going to, that's the worst thing that can happen, right? And I think it is really important to find, there are two aspects to hiring. The one is that if I'm hiring someone, they need to be a fit for my team, both in terms of the skills that they bring, perhaps the experience they bring, and what do they fit into our kind of organizational structures? Are they going to work in our team, etc.? But there's a flip side to that as well, and that has to do with you as an individual. And is that company also going to fulfill the needs that you have in a workplace? So the fit needs to go both ways. And there's often this emphasis on that, you must fit into the company, and that's not necessarily a recipe for a happy work environment for you. Yeah. So it's as important that these things go both ways. That it's not just the company interviewing you; you should be interviewing the company as well. And I think that's a really important point to make. However, of course, we all need to eat and pay our rent and whatnot. So, it might be, a luxury in the beginning of your career, perhaps, to be able to say, no, that company's not for me. But I think as you start, once you've had a few years experience and you may be looking to move on or something like that, that's definitely something that you need to be thinking of. Yeah, but I mean, as Scott mentioned, hiring is incredibly difficult. I recently hired for an intermediate designer to join my team, and I received 12 applications, and I interviewed one person from those 12 because they just did not meet the requirements at all. So if you are determined and you're a talented person in terms of your chosen field, and you've got some nice work to show, don't also be put off by, oh, I don't have 2 years experience, I only have 18 months. All these kinds of things as well. You don't need to go, oh, this job application says I must have this and this and this and this. Apply for jobs that look interesting to you. And again, they might say, okay, well, we're looking for someone with more experience, but it's again, all you have is sorry, it's not going to work out this time. And I can guarantee that for this intermediate position that I was advertising, I would have gotten far higher quality kind of work submissions from people who didn't have the intermediate level of experience than I actually ended up receiving. So I think it's important also to go, don't limit yourself. Don't go, oh, gee, I don't have this says 2 years of this and 1 year of that and blah, 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 blah. Don't let that put you off either, because those are often just boilerplates, right? Someone in HR has written a job ad. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be able to fulfill the requirements of that position. So if it looks interesting to you, just go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's very important. Like I think it's also important to note that it's often kind of a bit of a running joke in the field, like in terms of job postings. Like there's this running joke almost that like specifically within development, that most junior like job postings are like at the level of an entire tech team. You need to be able to do this and this and this and this and this. And generally, like as Justin said, most of the time, like a lot of those things aren't even written by, like they're written by HR. And HR just goes on Google and they Google like what should a front end developer be able to do. And it's almost like a shopping cart, and they just like chuck everything in the hopes that like someone matches some of these. Like it's almost like, it's like I've seen some insane job postings that are way beyond what's reasonable for someone at that level. But like companies, they kind of it's almost like this whole thing about they kind of aim for like the best, most amazing thing that they can get, and then they're willing to settle for like, it's almost like I would be curious how many companies actually think they would be able to get the candidate that is actually listed in the job description. Yeah.
Very seldom does it all match.
Yeah.
And so I'm also curious, Justin and Liesel, like what is your kind of thinking around, specifically when talking about design? I actually don't know the answer to this, so which is why I'm also trying to kind of frame the question like as I'm speaking. Would you say it's beneficial if someone has experience in development or business analysis or something not related to the technical process of design? Or would you prefer just someone to just like get hyper specialized in design and just be able to touch anything and make it visually amazing?
I think it has a lot to do with the kind of products that you're working on within your particular organization. I mean, for my organization, if I can just talk about us, we build what we would call web applications, right, rather than websites. So the kind of design work that we need is very, very UI focused. It's very much around, the giant form that is these applications. We're not necessarily looking for someone who can design a really amazing, marketing landing page, or who has incredible illustration skills or anything like that, because that's not really the work that we do. So that wouldn't be, on top on our list of someone that we would be looking at. In our case, I definitely think familiarity with HTML and CSS is a massive plus, but it's in no way a requirement. I think that's an onerous requirement to place, particularly for juniors. I don't think that's something that is reasonable to expect of a junior. But I can say that if someone comes and they're applying for a design job on my team and they demonstrate that they understand, how CSS layout is going to work and what's possible and what's not, and what is best practice within, front end itself, that goes a really, really long way to enhancing your understanding when you are designing the kind of user interface that we're talking about for an application. I think if you're joining a like marketing boutique kind of agency that does a lot of marketing type website work, it's a very different requirement. Because there you're looking at being very true to brand, and you're looking at probably a lot more kind of illustrations and perhaps animations and all sorts of things. So, speaking from my perspective, definitely HTML and CSS is great, but not disqualifying. And then Scott, kind of you and I ruffle everyone's feathers when we say this, but we pretty much think that UI people should be able to do UX, and that they aren't separate professions necessarily. I think that parts of UX that are separated. What am I saying? Separated. That's not a word. That are separate. Research in particular, interviewing, user testing. Those are very specific skills. But in terms of the nitty gritty of an application, in terms of its design and layout, unlike, should we use a modal? The answer is always no, right? And that's something that a UI person should be able to understand around UX. So that's really important to me when I'm speaking to people, is that they have that understanding around what best practice is around UX from an application design point of view, not from doing research or user testing or anything like that. So those are the kinds of things that I generally look for. And one last thing I'm rambling on. Tools are irrelevant in my opinion. Yeah. Don't put Figma 100% on your CV. Yeah, like so many people do. I don't care what tool you use. Yeah, the tool is agnostic. You can learn any tool. Yeah. So if you've only ever used, I don't know, Photoshop, okay, that's a bad example, but you demonstrate that you're a really good UI UX designer with that tool, then that should no way penalize you in any way. You see so many job posts that say must have 7 years experience with Figma or whatever. It's like that's a huge red flag for me. The tool is agnostic. It's not. It's like saying we'll only hire a developer if they only use VS Code for writing their code. Yeah.
I'll put that in my job post. Get out of here with your web storm.
So the short answer is digital experience is great. Understanding UX principles is great, but it depends on the kind of work that you're being hired for.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think there's also I think something that should also not be underestimated is like the kind of the give and take. There, like sometimes teams just assume that okay, there's probably going to have to be a bit of onboarding. There's probably going to have to be a bit of like actual, maybe we're using some tool that like certain people are not familiar with. Okay, maybe we just show them the ropes. More so the case if it's like something like not common, like Figma or so forth. But let's say you're still using Sketch or whatever. If you're hiring and you're still using Sketch, like you better be prepared that you are gonna have to teach whoever applies for that job to use Sketch. I don't think there are a lot of people entering the job market now that actually are familiar with Sketch. And I promised myself I'm not going to say stuff that's going to get me in trouble. And like I've already shot off both my feet.
I think just one last thing on this that I want to mention in terms of onboarding and things like that is, I think that's again because it comes back to like interviewing the place you're going to be working at as well. I mean, we have a policy really that we don't expect new hires, developers, designers, QA, whatever it might be, to do any billable client work for a month. And they can obviously, if they're ready or they feel they're ready earlier than that, absolutely fine. But there's no expectation. The expectation for your first month at NML is that you learn how NML works, and that could be and if you need to do a course, you've never used Figma before, we'll put you on a Figma course, that whatever it might be. So onboarding is really, really important. Just getting thrown into a position and being expected to be producing billable work from day one, I don't think that's good for organizations or individuals. But,
client relationships.
Especially that,
Yeah.
So that just comes back to like, is this the right company for me rather than the other way around?
Liesel, you want to add to that?
No, I agree with it. I agree. Yeah.
Okay. No, so you unmuted yourself.
Ever to learn a tool, but that's why all the HR people always put "and similar" between brackets. But I think people nowadays are so tool agnostic in any case. People, I mean, I look at my son, he's 12. You take him from a Windows machine to an Apple, and it's not even, there's not even a comment about it. Like people just navigate these things quite easily. So yeah, no, it's more about can you do the work than the tool. But you need to be able to adopt whatever systems and tools the company that you're going to work for. I mean, you need to put that's sometimes something that we struggle with is people don't take the seriousness of the tool as the tool of their trade serious enough. So even though you might not be that proficient in something like Figma yet, that is one thing that you're going to have to do. Is learn it as fast as possible, like absolute focus on it.
Yeah, and I think like that is true for even development as well. Like I always tell my students, like don't fall in love with your tools, because in 5 years there's going to be something different. And then I think that the goal is not to get really good at a tool with a tool and then like, all right, I'm set to go, to like when I retire, like I'm still gonna be using this. Like I think there's also a skill in actually being able to learn new tools. But like the paradox there being that in order to get good at that, you really need to deep dive into tools, because you need to understand almost the things that they abstract. So, if you only have a surface level understanding, then it's going to be very hard switching from one tool to another, because you don't necessarily understand the underlying logic of what that tool is trying to emulate or do. And if you go deep enough, then you can almost be like, okay, cool. Like I understand what Figma is trying to abstract in terms of responsiveness, in terms of kind of, the underlying HTML and CSS. And then if you jump to a different tool, you're like, okay, cool. I understand how this tool takes this exact same things, but it presents it in a different way, or it allows me to interact with it in a different way. But without but I'm also cognizant of, I don't want us old farts to just be doing all the talking. So like, huh?
You take that.
So I maybe want to, Jane, specifically with you, starting. Like I'm curious whether, and I think just because your journey has been a bit more interesting compared to Taylor and Dean, who kind of went to study something and then they applied for a job in that field. What was your understanding of what it is that you would eventually do with the skills that you learned, and how did that match with what you actually ended up doing when you were working?
Hi. So when I went back to study, I had no idea what I was going to go study. I did not know about any of this stuff. I heard about UX a lot, and I realized that there was quite a strong connection between what I did in my strategy course and UX. So we did a lot of research about businesses and products, and basically you can transfer that into the digital space too. So we would do micro environmental analysis, macro environmental analysis, and internal analysis of business, and make decisions and do customer journeys, and have that same focus on the customer, but instead of the customer, now it's the user. Also analyzing stakeholders and things like that. So initially I came into the course because I was like, UX sounds interesting, don't really know what it's about at all. It seems like it could be related to strategy, and it was. So that was very cool. And then once the course started with design, and I loved it. I really, it was super great to be creative. And then Skulk started teaching development, and I found it so frustrating I thought it was so annoying. I didn't get the stuff. I hated it. And then it just...
That's what I aim
all
for.
and then all of a sudden one day it just clicked for me, and I just developed like this passion for it. And I really I find it as satisfying, if not more satisfying, than designing things. And I feel like they're quite closely related. You know, I like to design something and then create it in code. And I don't like to leave behind my background in you know, business and branding. I always like to take that knowledge that I have with me and utilize it wherever I can. So I know, I mean, sometimes people study something completely different that maybe won't have anything to do, and they'll do the switch. But I'm sure, like, I find here and there ways where I'm like, okay, cool, I've learned this skill that I can use here. Sometimes you find those things, and it's a difficult decision to make, to do a career change. But so far, personally, I've really loved the tech space. I think it's a great industry. It's one of the reasons I took the risk to go back and study some more. So yeah, I'm definitely not regretting any of the decisions. Yeah, so that's been my experience.
Oh, that's great. I also want to like add to that this is something I see quite often, and I think like it's something that's not mentioned enough. Is so I've been in various situations where, like, one specific situation that I can think of now where I think it's important to note as well that domain knowledge is also a big thing. Justin, you might also kind of agree with this, you know, working in the fintech space and so forth. There's a lot of domain knowledge that you gain purely from just working in that space that doesn't have much to do with the technical skills. You know, kind of terminology, kind of conceptual models, those type of things. Like, there's two instances where I was hiring people and in the world of e-commerce, specifically like large scale e-commerce, where there was like a candidate that was just starting out in the world of development or design, but they have worked within that specific domain for a very long time. So they knew about how merchandising works. They knew about like all the processes associated and so forth. And we actually ended up hiring someone who was less skilled in design, but they had a very strong kind of like knowledge of the domain. And I think we sometimes neglect to mention that is like all the design work and so forth that we do is only meaningful insofar that it's kind of situated within a specific domain. If you don't understand, you know, like, for example, with the stuff that Justin and them at NML do, if you don't understand kind of the mechanisms and how your design fits into the bigger like kind of business and product and so forth, it doesn't really matter how great your button looks. You can create the best button that anyone has ever seen, but if it doesn't make sense within the bigger product, or you don't understand the role it serves in the entire process that a user goes through, that's not of help to anyone. And I sometimes think that isn't mentioned enough. And I think, Jane, yours is a good example where a lot of times when people are trying to make career changes, maybe see like whether you can leverage the existing skills that you have. Like maybe you have a lot of experience in a specific domain, and like you can actually use that to your advantage and maybe apply for jobs in that domain for design positions, because you can say, hey, I've worked with this type of thing for a very long time. I'm still learning the design side, but I understand the things that are going to be designed or that the design is going to be used for like really, really well. Yeah. Talor, I'm also curious what your experience was like in terms of what you thought a job in this industry would entail, and then what it actually ended up being, and like how maybe that differed.
Yeah, so actually I was thinking about it when you were just speaking, and the same kind of transition happen for me where I didn't really realize that within having like a product designer role, you would need so much knowledge on different kind of products that you're working on. I started working on some retainer work quite early on for a laboratory equipment company, and we were building their internal system. And there was so much talk about like purchase requisitions and internal sales orders and like MUP and stuff like that. And like with what you're saying, it's not all about how well you can design a button or make something look aesthetic, but also about how open you are to learning about different processes and just learning about like the bigger picture as well. So I actually think that's something I really enjoy about being a product designer, is being put onto different projects and learning about different industries that I wouldn't have really learned about before. So that was something that I kind of had to, I didn't expect that at all. And they don't really talk to you about that in university. It's usually more design focused and more about like the aesthetics and stuff like that, which is great, but it can only take you so far. And I think just like what's important when starting a job and, you know, applying for jobs is just showing that you're really eager to learn and eager to grow. And if you don't understand something, like doing your research on it and just showing that you're willing to really try. Because I think, like you've mentioned in this call, people aren't wanting to hire the perfect employee. Like it's just not possible to find that. So being willing to learn and grow as much as you can is, I think, also what employers maybe want to see. Yeah, so I think that's all I have to say on that.
No, that's great, and like I 100% agree. Like it's also one of the things I find like super satisfying. Some people find that terrifying, that they have to learn new things every time they take on a new project. But like, sure, I've just learned the weirdest stuff. Like I spent 3 years working for National Treasury, and like just how budgeting at a national level works. It's just like, sure, like. Well, but anyway, that's a different discussion.
Yeah, it's intimidating at first, though. I think it's
100%.
scary and it's frustrating as well because it doesn't always click very quickly, and you kind of there's a lot of iterations and back and forth, and but it's rewarding and fun.
And there's also, once again, there's value in that domain knowledge. So if you and another candidate were to apply for a job that is of that nature, that is with, once again, laboratory equipment and so forth, you would have a massive competitive advantage by already having experience with that domain. And so, which is what I'm effectively saying, is people often discount that. So you might not be the greatest designer, but like you might have specific domain experience that you can really leverage and kind of, so specifically maybe look for jobs in something that you design jobs in a field that you have a lot of experience with. Yes, go ahead.
No, I just want to add to that. So we kind of have this luxury of working across industries. So we've worked in prop tech and security, logistics, and you can see how wide, with a small team, how wide you would need to think, because we build in different industries, and every time we take on a new product, you know, if you as a designer or a product designer or a UX person working on that thing, that product in that specific industry, there's just like so much that you need to learn about that specific industry. So absolutely. Now some companies do specialize in one thing, but there are other companies like us who we work across industries, and there's a lot of information that you have to have that self-motivation to go and read things. Like I always like cultivate whatever I'm reading towards what I am having to learn on the side. You know, so if we have to roll out a new process in the company, there's this day job going on, and there's this my whole Chrome morphs into a thing on the side that has a life of its own, where you are just. I also listened to a podcast this morning, and it's the speed at which we are. The industry that we're in asks of us to learn all the time. You can never stagnate. So you kind of have to build this learning. 20% of your day has to go into some kind of learning, and the other 80% put that into your tasks, your outcomes, and whatever you have to do. But you have to have this whole other world that you're kind of studying on the side, so that you can build a mental picture of what you are dealing with. Maybe a little bit of a personal recommendation I made there, but definitely it plays into working across industries and having to take in that knowledge to be able to apply certain things. Come up with a UX strategy for so say we've got something that is actually going to be a POC in vehicles. Like the way you're going to you take on that UX strategy of what you're going to do with that versus building a banking application, it is so vastly different. You can't just go to the textbook and say, well, in this circumstance, you have to think on your feet. You have to come up with practical, pragmatic solutions. And it's not going to come to you. It's not going to fall on your desk. To put in that time and that energy, and then have that bravery to drop it in your morning stand-up and say, but what about this? Don't sit quietly in the corner.
I also think one thing that I've realized is that I think a lot of people go into this field thinking that your job is to give answers. Like someone's like, okay, cool, where should the button go? And then you're like, okay, I'm the expert and I know best, and the button should go there. And I actually find that the more senior you get, the more you kind of understand your role as a role of facilitation. Kind of, you almost realize that you barely have any answers, but your role is like everyone involved in the conversation to guide that conversation in a direction where people would be able to give useful answers, and not necessarily argue over whether the button should be purple or green or whatever. Like I think I think that's also something that's not discussed enough, is like the role of a designer as a facilitator, to kind of guide conversations away from that place and into more meaningful kind of conversations, and not be there and I'm like the domain, I'm like the expert, and ask me how big should this nav bar be, and like I'll tell you I'm the expert and it needs to be this size. And I think that's a big mind shift. Dean, I would love to also get to some of the questions that were asked in the text chat. But I think it just shows how fertile ground this is, that like we can, like, it takes us so long to just move through these things because there's just so much to unpack, which is amazing. Because the opposite would be us sitting here and being like, it's like almost like there's all these things to discuss. Dean, what has your experience been in terms of your expectations of what it would actually be working like, what it would be like working in the field, and what it actually was? And what are maybe things that you wish you could tell your past self in terms of, hey, like this is actually really important, and hey, this is actually not that important?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, when I started out, I definitely thought like I was just going to be 24/7 on Figma, doing designs, moving things around. And of course, like as I went to study and the whole UX part came in, I then also definitely realized, but it's more about the experience. The visual is just the cover of it. It's like the wrapping of the present almost. But yeah, and then when I started working, I definitely realized that my role did take more responsibilities or more roots than I initially thought. But yeah, relating back to your thing about you just have to be open-minded and continuously in that learning process. Like when I started at the fintech, I mean, we're all about making payments and sending money. And recently we've also, a bank also came to us. And so talking with a bank in the language that they communicate with. So there was a lot of that also, like, learning the language of being in that product space and being in a team and being in a business. And like I literally had like a whole glossary of just abbreviations that I had to go through so I can just remember and like like know what's going on in meetings. But like with that as well is that you just have to be open-minded and willing to learn those things, because like at the end of the day, those list of abbreviations is how I communicate to my co-workers and how I communicate to the stakeholders. And that's how they understand when we're on the same page as well. And along with that as well, like things that I would have told myself is definitely pay more attention to your business studies. Because I definitely think there's like, I mean, as product designers, we are building a product. And initially when we're starting out, you're thinking about, oh, I want to make this look red and I want to make this look like this. But you also have to really think about the more deeper things of this product, like how, if it's a business, how is this business going to make money through this project? How are we going to make people, or like have people stay on this particular screen, or make them click on this particular thing? There's a lot more thought into that as well. So yeah, no, I think that would probably be mine.
Oh, that's great. So hopefully we can get to some of the text questions. So I'll just add one here. Oh, Justin, was that you? Yeah, quick fingers.
Sorry, this one just popped up much earlier. I wasn't sure if you'd seen it, Skulk.
Yeah. So yeah, do you want to take it?
Yeah, I mean, if I speak for my company, we don't have HR. I mean, we do. That sounds
I am
terrible.
the law.
That sounds terrible. We do. We have very strict policies and blah, 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 blah. But we don't have an HR department. Yeah. And hiring is the responsibility of department heads in terms of writing the job posts and conducting interviews, looking at CVs and so on. And you only really find these large HR, big HR departments that you get lost in large organizations. I mean, I'm not sure what Liesel has to add to that, but in a large organization, they're just scanning your CV with an automated bit of software that's going to kick you out or not. Yeah, we don't operate like that. We read everything. It depends where you are applying. Yeah,
extremely hard. And in a smaller organization, it's difficult for me to even put that responsibility on another person, because I've probably scanned, the AI lives in my head. So I've probably scanned 5,000 CVs. So you know exactly, apart from the don't put just the profile picture and your name on the first page of your CV and that's it. Like there's so many things that you can pick up if you've got it practiced. We definitely don't go through a tick box kind of system. But it's very difficult to give that responsibility of doing that first layer of sifting. It really depends for us, almost per role. It depends on if we get 200 applicants or we get 12. And we will almost adapt our way of dealing with the CVs depending on what comes in. Certain roles, like a very junior role or a test automation engineer or something might really kick off, and you would just really quickly have a lot of applicants, and then you kind of take a harder approach to it because you need to get through this work. When it's a smaller amount of people or a more senior role, we really go in depth, so it really depends on it's basically on a per role basis. So no, you can get past the HR department. And similarly for us, we call it people operations in our organization. Our HR, if we have to pull a legal thing out, it's outsourced.
Same for us.
I think if you and you have to think about this because it's the kind of company that you work for. If people are constantly in the HR problem space, I can unequivocally now tell you they are doing something wrong.
Yeah.
People operations is about solving problems with the people in your organization. If somebody is constantly late, what an HR department would do is they would pull out a warning letter. Companies who are invested in people and the people operations of the company, they would go, why is somebody constantly late? How can we relieve that? Maybe they've got a sick child at home. Maybe they've got a transportation problem. Maybe they earn in the lower salary bracket, and there's just so many things. And then you start working with what is the problem, how do we solve it for that person. And when you look at companies from that perspective, because these are the people they're gonna work with you.
Yeah,
they're gonna make it they're gonna really be invested in the experience with you.
Wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you think it's worth spending a couple of minutes, I mean, we're chatting about what makes me throw a CV away?
Yeah, go for it. I can also add to that. Yeah.
Was it my comment about the profile pic and the name on the front page?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, your CV should be like one page, right? Designers over design their CVs.
Yeah.
Don't spend 2 weeks.
Just export that LinkedIn PDF.
Just do it. Yeah.
No, 100%.
We are not gauging your fit for a design role on the font choice on your CV and what your bullets look like. I absolutely assure you, it must be as readable as possible. I got one the other day with little hand-drawn illustrations of cats and flowers, and I was like, okay, that's maybe not what we're looking for.
I'm still sad you didn't accept that one. My CV, my beautiful CV, Justin.
Oh, sorry, Skulk. I didn't realize it was you. Yeah. So in terms of CVs, also, I get so many of them where there's like a sidebar, and then it says Figma, 100%, Illustrator, 80%, CSS, 10%. Like, what does that mean? What does it mean that 80% of Illustrator? I mean, it's absolutely meaningless, and it surprises me how often that happens. Don't put that in. You want a really, really strong introductory paragraph that tells me, why do you want this job? Yeah. And what are your goals related to that position? Yeah.
I'm going to quickly just interject, but you must go on with your thing. I made a few practical notes here that I wanted to give, and I don't know how you feel about it, but a cover letter goes a long way with me.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Because how I see the CV and the cover letter and the job post working together. A CV is a generic thing. You can edit your CV per job that you apply for. It's absolutely not frowned upon. However, what people sometimes do with us is they literally copy the bullet items I have in, and then they put it in the CV, and I wrote that thing so I can spot it at a mile. So don't match it that closely. But if people are, for instance, talking about skills that you do have, bring that to light, because you're showing that there's a match on the skills. And what the cover letter does is, and you can have a little intro on your CV, but what the cover letter does, it gives a little bit of a picture about the person that doesn't come across on the CV. And you fill that gap with a cover letter, and it doesn't have to be long, but it shows that it just gives a little bit of, like, I'm a mother of 4 children. I'm so old. I worked at this place for so long. I love doing this. It's just a little bit, it gives your CV a little bit of personality.
It makes
and
you stand
then
out.
and a little bit of a match between maybe you talk in your cover letter quickly to what the company is looking for and why you think you're a fit, and then you can leave your CV almost like the edits on your CV. If you're applying for 10 things, you don't want to do 10 versions of a CV, so you can keep that as generic as possible, but you can tweak little things on it. But it shows me. Because as Justin said, hiring is really hard. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So somebody lands on your desk and you feel like, okay, they also put something in. There's a match. They care about it. I care about it, but there's also somebody else that cares about it. And it goes a long way.
Yeah, you do need to tailor something to this particular organization in some way. Right? Otherwise,
yes, no, absolutely.
You can't just send the same thing off to all 10 companies, because also the danger in that is that in some point you're going to call one of them the name of one of the other ones.
Happened to me.
Oh no, I've seen that as well.
More than once.
Yeah.
I've been on the dishing outside of that as well in my life before.
Yeah. There's a comment here that actually pretty much sums up, like, what are your previous jobs? What did you do with them? And then describe them. Yeah, that works perfectly well. And remember also that we're looking at solutions-driven people in our industry. Yeah. So if you can say, and of course, we're talking about junior also and first jobs and all of that. So you may not necessarily have a long list, but you can include projects that you worked on, anything you've done in your spare time, anything like that can go in that for your very first job application. Yeah. So Stevies that stand out to me are ones where people have said, this is what I did, and this is what I solved at that particular position. Those really stand out for me, because it shows me that you're not just thinking of the UI, as I think both Taylor and Dean mentioned. How does this fit into business objectives and things like that? It shows me that you're thinking about those things. You're not just going, I redesigned the navigation bar. I can find a navigation bar on Dribble,
and you can articulate the value that you provided, and I think that's big. And I think
that's the most important thing for me when I'm reading a CV is, does the person who's applying for this job understand the value of their work, and how that fits into a larger kind of system, rather than just, this is what I did, and then I did this. Also, this sounds like a silly thing, but start with your most recent, not your first. Not the first job you had, the last job you had.
Yeah.
Sounds silly and trivial, but I want to know what you're doing now. Yeah.
Also, don't put in your high school marks.
Oh, no one cares.
People want your...
Don't put in your university marks either.
No, don't bother.
All my students are so shocked when I tell them no one cares about the grade you got for your second year of studying. No one cares. If you tell me that you got 70% in your second year of studying, I'm going to see that as a red flag. No, legit. I'd be like, okay, this person doesn't really understand what I'm looking for here.
Just another thing, and this isn't, sorry, Liesel, this isn't really design specific, but don't overshare your personal information in your CV, please. Don't put in your ID number, the name of your pet and your parents. Please, name. That's it. Yeah, people send me. I can go.
Don't open up Justin for poppy violations.
Yeah,
he doesn't want that on him.
No, we actually did a poppy workshop on Friday. It's terrifying. You don't want everyone in the world. I mean, I could probably go and identity theft a whole bunch of people just from CVs they've sent me. Be very careful with that. Sorry, it sounds like a trivial thing, but be very, very circumspect with how you share your personal information. Because
I used to work for an education company, and there was a big problem with people forging your diplomas and degrees and stuff. Yeah, so that is a thing. So if you do share that with a link to that or whatever, that it can be a problem for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then
So,
a Grammarly
sorry, go ahead,
free
Liesel.
goes a long way. Just to pick up those basic. But you'd be surprised that those kind of grammar and spelling mistakes, and then putting your experience in the wrong order, that happens at least 30% of the time. That people get just the basics. And I'm not the kind of person who would just throw a CV out for one spelling mistakes, but there are companies that will. It would just it's that those HR tick. If there's a spelling error or a grammar error, they would just dump the CV. So remove that from your list of things that could go wrong.
Yeah, Grammarly is a great suggestion. If you don't use it, the free version works fine. It's good. It's really good. Yeah.
I'm also curious what your feelings are around like URLs to LinkedIn or like Behance or Dribble or so forth. I would definitely be more skeptical if someone just sends me PDFs and there's no link to any online presence.
Yeah.
Do you guys share that sentiment?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's very important to have an online presence. It doesn't have to be your own personal website. Behance, Dribble, absolutely fine. But that just shows that you are willing that you stand by your work, right? I think once you take the step of making work that you've done publicly accessible in a creative space, it shows that you have confidence in it. And I think that goes a long way as well. It's great to have your own website, but that's not easy. It took me 7 years to make mine live, and Schalk and I always joke about that. And I haven't updated it in like 4 years now.
Mine's also due for a redesign.
We'll get it done in 2030. So maintaining a personal website it's a massive undertaking, really, on top of everything else that you need to do. Whereas tools like Behance, Dribble, although Dribble, I think you need, I'm not sure now if you need to pay for that to upload stuff anymore. I'm not sure now. But anyway, yeah, those are great tools. If someone can send me to those, fantastic. As much as we hate LinkedIn and don't ever want to go there because there's 700 recruiters in our inboxes, it's good to have a profile there as well. Just set one up and then forget about it.
One thing that I appreciate about like LinkedIn and so forth is, at the very least, if you put stuff on there, there's an awareness that people can call you out if there are outright lies. So if you say that, hey, I worked at this company and I managed the design system, then someone from that company is probably going to get a notification that you said you worked at this company or whatever. There have been instances like where people have said they worked at companies and the companies called them out on LinkedIn and like, dude, you never worked for us. So I think at the very least, like, I appreciate that dynamic, which you don't get in just a PDF document. The same for Behance and whatever, is that, at the very least, I know that you're going to be much more hesitant to put anything that's plagiarized or whatever on there, which you don't necessarily have with the PDF. But it's hard to say because I think this is subjective between people looking at portfolios and stuff. I am much more cautious when there's no links to anything online, when it's just PDF documents that you're sending me.
Fritz makes a good point that having a portfolio on something like Dribble also shows that you're aware of what's happening in the design world.
At the very least, you're looking at other people's portfolios as well.
That's great. And Jane has had feedback on LinkedIn.
Cool.
If I could also just add to that, I think I'm not sure if you guys would agree as well, but I think posting your work on LinkedIn and setting up a LinkedIn account is quite important for like designers who are wanting to get into the industry, like specifically for like new designers looking for jobs. That's how I got my internship, was reposting work that I'd done on Behance, and then like hashtagging design, UX design. I don't know if like Skulk and Justin, you guys would agree with that, but I think just connecting with people on LinkedIn, commenting on other people's posts, I feel like that's also a good indication of like you're invested in this industry, you know, are proud of your work, and you're putting yourself out there. I'm not sure if you guys would agree.
No, 100%. I think the same happened with Dean as well. I think the first work that he got was also, he shared stuff on LinkedIn, and someone contacted him and said like, hey, I really like the work you've done. Are you maybe looking for freelance work or so forth?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
think
cool.
No, go ahead.
Even my current job, how I got there was also through a LinkedIn post, or looking on LinkedIn for those the job boards section that they have there.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely agree with Taylor. It's way better to rather put something out there than to just keep it on your desktop folder. Like whatever you do, like rather put it on the internet, let other people see it.
Even if it's not perfect, like even if you don't think that it's good enough, just putting it out there, you can always go back to Behance and edit it later, but at least you're starting to build up your portfolio in that way.
And I think that's also like kind of something that Justin touched on, is that once again, don't over design the actual frame that's presenting the work, whether that be your CV or your Behance or whatever. I see that a ton. Specifically when people put their work on Behance, it's almost like the actual layout is over designed, and it actually gets in the way of actually just reading through it and making sense of the actual project. Like if you're in a place where you're like, I'm not, like, it's going to take me, like, I'm not ready to put my work up, it's going to take too long or whatever, you're probably over designing it. Like, just put the images on there. Like you should, like, when you're putting stuff in a portfolio or a CV or whatever, the aim should be readability and not like avant-garde. You don't want to like do some crazy deconstruction typography and stuff.
I just want to add something about LinkedIn. I think it's a really great place to get your recommendations and collect those. You can get recommended from people you studied with, people you worked in groups with, past experience, and then you can just keep those on your LinkedIn and show the ones that you want. And also they have this new feature where you can add links to, for example, some of the websites I developed, I have links to the website, and it gets put on featured work at the top of your LinkedIn profile.
Okay, that's cool.
That's a great question by Amber. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Justin.
No, I was going to say great question by Amber.
Okay, I'm just hands off. Like, you can just run the show now. I want to click on it every time, and like you're just in quick fingers.
I'm the StreamYard maestro.
I need to up my game.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. Okay.
Especially when talking about NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. And specifically if you're only doing part of it. It's very hard to tease out where your work ends and someone else's work begins. I don't know if anyone can speak to that.
Yeah. It's hard to say which part is yours and what somebody else did, and you don't want to create the picture that you've done all of that and actually you worked with a team. Some people, what I've seen in the past is people do sometimes share a little bit of a personal thing in the application, and then they would put the disclaimer in where they would say, this is work that I've done for a company and it's PIN protected. So they would send you a PIN and you access the site and you put the PIN in and then you can view it, but they would only dish out that PIN to very specific people and they're already a few steps into the hiring process. And the other way of doing it, I think Dribble and Behance allows for that is you can have your personal profile, and then it would show, and the company one, and then it would show that these 3 people collaborated on this job, and so you get your recognition through that. So it does kind of appear on your personal profile, but it is part of, you can see, I'd be able to see that this person did it as part of a team, and it's not solely their own work, because I think you have to be transparent about that. Those are the 2 ways that I've seen people do that.
And then you can talk to, if a person gets into an interview phase, then you can ask them questions about that. So, but just 2 things from my side. You need to ask permission to do that, even if you have it behind a password or whatever, because you are sharing work that, if you work like at NML, we have clients essentially that we don't own that IP, right? The clients has paid for it, even though we have created it. We have some clients who won't even let us put the project on our website. So that makes it difficult. So you can get into that kind of a situation. But
and it's written into contracts most of the time.
It is. Like, we were going to get an NML Dribble account and do all of that. Then we realized that, what are we going to show on there? The work we did for our own website, because, and especially in financial services, I mean, that's just, the NDAs are crazy. So it is a difficult one. But asking permission goes a long way.
And people always go like, how do you ask for permission? Because you don't want your employer to know
that for another job.
It's the same as with references. It's this, people don't know how to navigate it, because you're scared of getting somebody in your company who's actually, so if we check references, which these days I don't even want to do anymore because there's so many POPI regulations around it. Oh, I lost my train of thought there.
People in your, even if asking someone in your company to be a reference.
Yes, and then they go, but what if that person tells that person, and then people feel like, but who do I use as a reference? So people tend to not want to ask permission for these things because they feel like it's going to put a red flag. But that's another one of the points I had written down. And it's sort of something that I feel passionate about, and I want people to start thinking about work differently. It's like it depends on where in your life you are and your age and how deep into your career you are, but it's a relationship. And if you're dating somebody now, it does not mean you're going to date this person for the rest of your life. You might date this person for 2 years while what the 2 of you want at this point is aligned. But then what might happen is what you want is something different, and that person, it's completely against the avenue that they want to go down. And that's where you can beautifully and amicably, without burning a bridge, you can walk away from this company. And you could actually, if the company is open enough for that, you could have conversations with your company about that, and talk to them and say, I really want to stay, but is there a way that we could align? And if you get to the point where you're not just going to walk out on your, well, some people do, but you're not going to walk out of a relationship of 2 years. You're going to have a conversation about it. So if people start thinking about their work relationship a little bit, not completely like that, but a little bit like that, where you can be transparent and you can have open conversations with people in your organization about that, and that it's okay. Because some people come to me and they say, I'm going to hand in my resignation tomorrow, and they think that I'm going to bawl my eyes out. And I don't. I know.
On the spot.
You go home and do it in private.
It depends on what time of the day it happens and the amount of pressure you're under, I guess. But we don't bawl our eyes out because we know it's not forever.
Yeah, I think
It's
some
a journey that we walk together
Mm.
for a certain amount of time, and then, or you could go, I want to walk this journey with this. I love them. I want to walk this journey with them for 10 years. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't mean it's forever, and it's okay to move on.
Yeah, I've even worked at places where we actually had open discussions about that. I know it opened up. We were very open about the fact that after 4 or 5 years, you're probably going to start looking at moving on, just in terms of your career growth and so forth. If you want to stick around, that's great. And I think now, even at CodeSpace, so the coaches that I work with there, I have an open discussion with them, and I tell them, like, listen, if after 5 years you're going to be overqualified for this position, so like, if you enjoy it and you find it fulfilling, by all means, like, stick around, but don't, out of a sense of loyalty, stay here when you've kind of outgrown this position. And that differs from company to company. Maybe, like, certain companies have kind of a vertical kind of, almost want to say, I don't want to say ladder, but you guys know what I mean. Like, there's room for growth in a company, but some companies don't have that, and you can be upfront and say, like, listen, like, no hard feelings. I know for a fact that after 5-6 years you're going to be overqualified, just from the experience that you gain here. But like, so back to sorry, go ahead, Justin.
Sorry, Scott, I think we're kind of running out of time a bit.
Yeah, so I maybe want to just quickly just focus on getting like some of the remaining like questions. Sorry, I just want to quickly get back to Amber's question, which I don't necessarily see if I can override you, Justin. Ha! Take that. All right. Which I don't think we've fully addressed. So I just want to also say that I think it's also, don't discount just like the value of explicitly just writing something out, writing out what you did and the value you provided and the problems that you solved and the solutions that you came up with. So you don't necessarily have to say, like, oh, like, I worked on this and this was the environment variables we used to deploy the project. And, this is like some internal, like, secret information about the company. You can also just be like very broad and say, like, listen, like, I came there and like there wasn't really a design system. So I started and we looked at buttons and had meetings every Friday and so forth and so forth, and kind of maybe use prose a bit. And I think that's discounted often. I definitely nowadays, I also, once again, I don't think I'm able to show anything from the last 6 years that I've worked on, just because of NDAs and stuff, and because I work in the startup space. But effectively on my website, I don't think I have any images on my website. It's literally just like a paragraph, like, hey,
the NML work.
Yeah, I just say, like, listen, when I was working, like when I did work for National Treasury, this is what I did, this is who I worked with, this is kind of the outcomes of the things that I worked on and so forth. Yeah, so don't discount that. Yeah,
I think that's a great point, Scott. And just like learning to write a case study is a really, really good skill to have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do not just throw artifacts on Behance. Like, that is my pet peeve. Like, oh, here's some swatches, here's some design systems, here's some wireframe. Oh, like, you know what I'm talking about. You get those where it's like, here's 9 wireframes with no context, but like, okay, don't even get me started. Like, just like throwing design artifacts and being like, okay, I can see wireframes were created, I can see markups were created. I don't know what these things are or how they fit into anything, but good on you, I guess. Anyway, yeah. Okay, Justin, I'll give you control back. So I think there's 2 more.
Yeah, these are kind of related. I'm currently learning using Figma to upskill for UX with an initial focus on AI. As a developer, I really enjoy it. I consider myself a problem solver, though I'm not a developer. So there's someone who's upskilling. And then related to that, we have a question around portfolio or advice for later life career changes from non-tech fields. People who've upskilled through online training. So people who are looking for their first job as a designer in UI or UX, but aren't looking for their first job, so to speak.
Period, yeah.
Yeah.
I also just quickly want to just interject and say I might have load shedding in a couple of minutes, so it's not me being rude if I disappear. Yeah.
We won't hold it against you.
Thank you. I think we did cover a lot of this with the kind of discussion around the domain knowledge that you might lean into. I also think soft skills, this is such a trite thing to say. Soft skills, sure, man, like just like knowing how to be an employee and communicate with people and act professionally. That's a big part of it, specifically in this industry. Like I often joke and I say in the tech world, if you are semi like adjusted socially, you have a competitive advantage. I've met some strange people in the tech industry. So yeah, don't discount that, myself included.
There's definitely some for experience. But you're gonna if you're doing a full career change, you're gonna maybe have to go a little bit sideways and maybe slightly down so that you can go up again. But yeah, I think from just when we've had people coming from a completely different background, they do progress very fast, and it's just that experience. I mean, experience brings a lot to the table. It does, and that's where all of you want to get to, is building up experience.
Particularly in the more kind of technical aspects of UX, like research, all those kinds of areas of UX. I think people who come from a different background get into that a lot easier and a lot faster than maybe UI design, where you've got to spend a lot of time to become a good UI designer. Because I think UX has far less of a barrier to entry, especially if you're coming from a background where if you've worked in business or anything like that, you're going to pick that up pretty quickly, I think. And there are lots of skills that you can transfer and leverage.
I think another thing that's also worth mentioning is that something that's maybe unique to tech as well is that it is we're on such kind of unstable and shifting ground that someone who's been working in the industry for 20 years doesn't necessarily have that much of a competitive advantage over you compared to if you're like a lawyer or an engineer or whatever. I think the tooling and the approaches, I've had to unlearn and relearn so many different things. Which is why kind of the tech world is such a kind of a popular destination for career changes, is that, someone who's been doing this for a very long time, if they haven't really kind of kept up or kind of reconsidered things, you might even be in a better position than they are if they've never unlearned some previous things that don't make sense anymore. Like almost your open mind is actually more beneficial than their kind of stubbornness. So I think that's also something worth mentioning. I think that's maybe... Yeah, go ahead, Liesel.
Sorry, Skalk. I actually I don't know if you were going to end it, but I wanted to ask Talor and Jane and Dean a question. What was the most difficult thing or the scariest thing that you had to navigate coming into the companies that you're at now as a new designer or employee? I don't want to put you on the spot, but what was hard for you to navigate, and what was scary about it? If you could maybe just elaborate on that. I don't know who wants to start.
Maybe I can start. I think one of the trickiest things when you start a new position is also knowing that you're the new one there, and everyone has established relationships and spots in the company already. So trying to find where your spot is can sometimes be tricky. Yeah.
And how did you end up solving it?
I think, I think you also kind of, sometimes you have a period when you join and you have to kind of pay your dues a bit, which might not be nice. But eventually I think it should settle in. You just continue doing good work, you are there to work, and then eventually you'll probably find your place.
It's just time. It takes time.
Dean Taylor?
I think for me, it was like getting used to just asking questions and not being afraid of asking questions and sounding silly. It was a bit of a strange transition into working because it was fully remote. So I never met anyone on my team until a few months later. So it did feel like it took longer to kind of make those connections and find your place, like Jane was saying. But yeah, I think just not worrying about asking questions, and yeah, being a good team player and open to learning. Yeah.
Do you know what we've seen a lot is people break off in silos with talking because they are so scared of saying the wrong thing on the channel. And if you're a remote organization, you should communicate in threads and the communication should be visible. But what we found, especially with young people coming in, is they are so fearful. So you have to coach it out of them to start talking in channels and using threads properly to do that, because you don't have, there's a way of doing it that's better. So yeah, that's kind of what I spoke about earlier is being brave. I sit in these conversations and we have design conversations, and I sometimes sit in tech discussions, and I've been in the industry for longer than 15 years, and I still sometimes feel like I don't want to say this because I'm going to sound like an idiot, and it's 15 years down the line, but rather say it and contribute than holding back, and also breaking the conversation away from where the conversation should be.
Yeah, and it's going to save you time in the long run as well, rather than just trying to figure something out by yourself and completely missing the mark. Yeah.
You're also creating the opportunity for, say there's 15 people on the channel, for 15 people to help you versus just pulling one person's attention away all the time.
That's definitely what I did when I started. I found a little buddy that was really sweet, and I just used to ask her everything. But then she was like, no, you need to ask in the thread now so that other people know what's going on and stuff. So it's a good skill to learn, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. It's good to know.
Yeah. I must say, I think my situation, it's gonna sound cliche, but I definitely, a scary part for me was to so we basically had these workshop sessions, and then I had to, on pen and paper, write on basically sketch out a website and everything, and then you have to and then I had to talk and present my ideas and give rationale behind everything, and that was quite a scary thing for me. Just on the spot, not really prepared to give a speech thing for me. But yeah, to help with that, I would definitely also say just have make random conversations with the people you work with. Just insert yourself there. So I think I'm speaking from someone. If you do struggle with that, speaking in front of people, or just communicating with people like that, just inserting yourself as well, and just doing things with them after work, if you want to just grab a beer or a coffee, and just doing things like that also makes you more relaxed in that environment to be able to do the things and speak and perform how you want to. So yeah, that was my scary experience.
sorry, I'm going to be a bit rude, and I'm probably just going to sign off now because I had to have load shedding 10 minutes ago. So it's coming. I can feel it. But yeah, like Justin, Liesel, can I just like hand over to you guys so you guys just end this off?
Absolutely.
Dean, Taylor, Jane, thanks so much for joining, guys. I also appreciate that this is really scary as well. But I think it's invaluable, specifically for anyone who's kind of looking at going through the same process. So I really appreciate that. Thanks so much, guys. All right. Have a great evening, everyone. Cool. I will hopefully chat to all of you soon. And thanks everyone in the text chat. It was amazing. Thanks.
Bye, Scott.
Bye.
Bye, Scott. Taylor, I realized when you were speaking that you're probably one of many, many, many young people who've never had a job in an office.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, it was.
I'm looking at Liesel now because we're going to be hiring people to join our teams that have never worked in an office before, and I think it's going to be a big change in how we approach how we hire as well. In terms of the kinds of things that we're looking for. It's very interesting to me because, you know, I'm of a certain age and we had to go to the office every day, and I don't go to an office anymore except if I feel like swimming in the pool, you know. So it's really we've got this whole new dynamic of people who are joining the workforce but who will only ever have worked remotely. And I think that has all sorts of different challenges for how we, as you know, managers or whatever we want to call ourselves, and also people getting their first job. There's a lot of different dynamics that there, and I think organizations are going to need to change and take those on board quite carefully.
It goes both ways because the remote game is getting quite strong. And now it's starting to stick out to me, the people who hasn't worked in a remote culture and environment. And you know how they struggle. It's really, really hard to break a 20-year habit for somebody.
Oh, yeah.
People become completely set in their ways. And so for me, it's almost easier to deal with. I want to say easy, like that's the route you should take. We all want challenges, but I can take any one of these people on the screen and throw them in and they're going to swim. But I get somebody more mature who's been working in an office for 20, it's more work to get them accustomed to the environment.
Yeah, and I think that gives young people entering the workforce at the moment a huge advantage as well, is that doing things online is like second nature to you. Whereas us old people, you know, we have to adapt.
I don't know, they're throwing a lot of comments about old and farts and things in here. And
okay, more experienced people.
I don't identify as old.
No, nor do I. I mean, just never mind. Ambit says they do hybrid. Yeah, we also do hybrid, but only if you want to. Yeah, we've got an office, but it's just a house. And some people go to the office every day because that's what they need. Some people I have never even seen in person. Is that something going on there? I don't know. Some people you never see in person ever. I mean, there's people I've never met who work on our teams. I think it's quite a big shift that's going to affect hiring a lot as well. Because, as you say, Liesel, people who've never worked remotely are at a massive disadvantage. So I really think for young people, what is that noise? I do not know.
Is it?
Anyway.
It's very strange. It sounds like a notification.
Something weird. I don't have any other tabs open. Anyway, right. Is there anything else we want to discuss? There are no more questions. I think maybe it's time to sign off.
I've got a final thing I want to say. And it's also one of my, I don't know what that is. But it's one of my notes that I wrote down, and it's somebody famous who had this saying, and I think it was Simon Sinek, but I could be wrong. He said, if you start a business and you think that 10 years down the line, what you started that business as is going to be exactly that, you shouldn't be starting a business. And I think that applies to a career as well. If you sitting in a chair today and you think you're going to be doing exactly this 10 years down the line, maybe you should expand your mind a little, because in any case, the industry we are in, we have job titles jumping out from all angles, and it's morphing so fast. So yeah, keep an open mind. We have test automation engineers who's become developers. We have UI people who morphed and only do UX now. Yeah, be open to it, and keep your eye on your organization and what roles they have, and be open to taking on those different roles, or work. Sometimes be open to work outside of what your job specifications say. I have a pet peeve if somebody says to me it's not my job. Go try it. So that's my final thought I wanted to leave.
Cool. Thanks so much for having us, guys. This was super informative for me.
Yeah, thank you, Jane, Taylor, and Dean for joining us, and much appreciated. I thought it was a great discussion, and hopefully we can do something similar, like in a year's time when you've got your next jobs. Your senior position. Yeah.
I think you have a question there, Justin. One last question.
Do I have Plastic Man on wax? Okay, give me a minute.
Justin's a DJ in his spare time.
That's one.
How did you pull that out so quick?
I actually pulled it up the other day. I knew where it was. But yeah, I have I don't know, lots of Plastic Man. Yeah, so yeah, thanks to everyone again. It was really great. If we could just stay back for a minute, and thanks to everyone in the chat for asking great questions. And yeah, as usual, this will be on the YouTube channel permanently. So if you feel anyone can benefit from it that you know, please share it. And we'll also post the link in the ZAPD Slack channels tomorrow once it's all rendered and whatnot. Okay, thanks all.
Thanks you. Thanks.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.